All right, gentlemen. We are talking race. We're taking a look at some case studies from around the world. This is the first part of the lecture. Okay, here we go. Key terms. All right. Number one, what is race? Well, race refers to physical differences that groups and cultures consider socially significant. All right. Physical differences that groups and cultures consider socially significant. All right. So race is physical differences, color of skin, hair, that sort of stuff. Ethnicity is shared culture, language, and ancestry. Okay. Ethnicity is a shared culture, language, ethnicity, and a belief system. Once again, shared culture, language, ancestry, and belief system. So race is physical differences. Ethnicity is what makes up our shared culture. Okay. What is racism? It is a belief that a primary determinant of human traits and capacities. All right. So, sorry. Yeah. So racism says that, look, race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, meaning race determines whether or not you're successful or not. And so so racism says there is an inherent superiority to certain types of race. So racism says that race, that's how we determine who's successful or not, okay, based upon your racial traits, and that there is a certain level of superiority to certain races. Xenophobia, fear or hatred of foreigners. Xenophobia is fear or hatred of foreigners. Why do racist thoughts occur? Well, what happens is you create us versus them groups. So the us groups feel that them poses a threat to their way of life. So because of that, I now think of them as, inferior or a danger. Okay. Why do racist thoughts occur? Because you're afraid that our us group will lose power if rights are given to the them groups. Okay, take a look at South Africa. All right. So why was there a racial divide in South Africa? Well, pretty simple. Britain came down and colonized South Africa in the 1700s. So you had the black South Africans, which were the majority, and they were called the Bantu, B-A-N-T-U. Okay. They were the majority, and then you had a white minority, which were the British citizens. Okay, so South Africa colonized in the 1700s. Okay, why was there a racial divide in South Africa? Well, you had the black majority, the Bantu, that were there prior, and then the white British that immigrated there. Okay, so you had a Population Registration Act. And this divided South African population into three categories: Bantu, colored, and white. What did the Population Registration Act do? It separated South Africa into three categories: Bantu, colored, and white. Okay. The Bantu could only go into certain places, and they needed papers or registration to go into other places. What did the Education Act do? Well, Afrikaans, which is A-F-R-I-K-A-A-N-S. Afrikaans, Afrikaans, all right? That becomes the main language used in Bantu or Black schools, all right? So what that did is, hey, you go to a Black school, you can only learn Afrikaans. You can't learn English. So education was used as a system to like force the Black majority of citizens to not have the same type of education as everyone else was in South Africa. So they were forced to learn like a native language. They were not allowed to be taught English in their schools. This is just Bantu. Okay, that's what the Education Act did. All right, so what's the result of all this? Well, in 1955, we start to have peaceful protests over apartheid, which is the racial segregation, okay? So 1955, all right, you have a peaceful protest, all right? It's called the Congress of the People, all right? Well, South African government controlled by whites bring up that peaceful protest, all right? Then in 1976, all right, you have the Soweto Uprising. 1976, the Soweto Uprising. S-O-W-E-T-O. S-O-W-E-T-O. All right. So students protesting against the Education Act. All right. Police opened fire into the presentation or into the protesters. Okay. Around 700 are killed. So you have two peaceful protests, the Congress of the People and the Soweto Uprising, okay? Once you have the police firing into the peaceful protesters with 700 killed, that leads to a violent protest. And so you have some bombings, okay, in the 60s. And it's mainly because when there were peaceful protests, they were met with violence from the government. What are the results of the protest? Well, the world community starts paying attention to South Africa in the 60s, mainly because of Nelson Mandela. Okay, and what happens is that pressure from the outside leads to the end of apartheid. The foreign countries say, listen, South Africa, we're not going to trade with you until you end apartheid. So that was the result of the protest. Foreign countries said, hey, listen, we're not going to trade with you until you end apartheid. So 1994 is the first time that you have free elections, meaning that everyone, blacks, coloreds, and or the Bantu, the coloreds, so those were British citizens that were mixed, and then whites. All right, everyone is allowed to vote, and you can see like the picture on the bottom right of like just lines stretching. I mean, the voting lasted 3 days because it took so long because everyone was voting. Okay. Nelson Mandela is going to use violent means to protest, okay? There with those bombings during the 60s, and that's why he gets arrested. But he is allowed, but he, he actually, regains his freedom when apartheid is ended. Okay? All right, that's it for the first part.